Hello, I'm Frank Mitchell with a shiningcityonahill.org. We're doing a series on end times and how they are clearly playing out in our time today in ways that we never thought would happen 10 or 20 years ago, I would say. But here we are. Again, we saw the first program, we saw chapter 17 of Revelation, clearly outlines the famous end-time Leviathan beast state that wants to control everything you buy, sell, say, do, or think. That would be the politically correct end-time state, or in world government, a humanistic state. And it's doing in Revelation exactly what Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 are doing. So it's here. It's not some mystery. And it's endorsed by an apostate church that says all religions are doing the same thing, which is a form of humanistic Christianity, which is the great falling away, which creates a false Christianity, which becomes the whore of Babylon, promoting the one world humanistic government, which we've also seen in our time. It's happening. We can't deny it. It's also declaring war on the people who are stopping all of this. Both the apostate church and the Leviathan beast state, humanistic state, see the only thing stopping their whole worldwide agenda in history is traditional Christians called fundamentalists or bitter clingers or basket of deplorables. And Christ and the saints fight back against globalism and apostasy in the church to reassert true worship of God in spirit and truth, and just and righteous free sovereign states with liberty and justice for all, as the American founders envisioned, to create shining cities on a hill for all the nations of the world. And eventually we win, we know from the later chapters in Revelation. And we have a 1,000-year reign of Christ and the saints. And then we saw in another next program of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that there's the great falling away, again, same great falling away that the whore of Babylon is embracing, which is Christian liberalism in reality. That's the bigger issue. And the man of lawlessness is a political leader that goes into the church promoting this humanistic Christianity, which is all humanistic false religions we are as gods. So it's a New Age, sometimes it's called New Age Christianity, sometimes it's called Gnostic Christianity, sometimes it's called liberal Christianity, and even black liberation theology is a form of Christian apostasy. And this guy is a man of lawlessness. There are two major spirits in Scripture: lawfulness, moral law and order, and the order and liberty of God and morality, and lawlessness that rebels against the authority and morality of God for self first. That's Luciferian false religion. And in reality, all religions are worshiping demons except Christianity and Judaism. Says the Bible, that's just a given. Our first century church held that Christ was the Son of God. They worshiped the God of Judaism. And they rejected the pagan gods of the state, which they took to be demons. That was just a given. As they took all the false gods of all the false religions to be demons, whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, whatever. Not complicated. It hasn't changed. That theology hasn't changed. Be it right or wrong, it hasn't changed. That theology of the Bible and traditional Christianity. Okay, this whole thing falls apart for Christianity at the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And the great apostasy, this great falling away, is Christian liberalism primarily, and manifests itself in all kinds of other things like New Age and Gnosticism. In our time, as traditional Christianity, when in fact they are against traditional Christianity, and they've been denounced as another Jesus and another gospel from the first century by the apostles themselves. In the late 19th century, early 20th century, intellectuals who did studies of the Bible decided, they were called higher critics. They're lower critics, but they were called higher critics to make them more knowledgeable than everybody else. Overt Gnostic tinges right there, right? Higher. We have higher understanding. Gnostic means to know. Gnostic, Gnostic means to know. The Gnostics have higher spiritual knowledge that's irrational. That makes them better and smarter than everybody else, more enlightened. And they don't believe in the atonement, the resurrection, and so forth, because they have a different Christianity. Gnostic Christianity doesn't believe in the fundamentals of the faith or the essentials, like the atonement, the resurrection, and so forth. Okay, now, the higher critics determined, incorrectly, by their scholarship at the end of the 19th century, that the Bible was fake, forgery, and fable. They based it on some pretty flaky stuff, but they came to that conclusion. The Bible was not reliable in its major elements concerning Sinai, Abraham, and certainly Jesus and the apostles and the resurrection. Just isn't reliable. It's all, what they said, long oral tradition written down many generations after the events, and all of the supernatural aspects of the stories are added over the generations that's passed from one person to the next. So we'll never really know what happened because the Bible is written so many generations after the events happened. Is that true? No. That's a factually false statement. So the whole premise of the higher critics, that the Bible is the product of long oral tradition, is factually false and can be easily demonstrated. For example, they thought the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles were probably written in the late 100s, right, the late 2nd century, early 3rd century. 195. Okay, but we know that that's not the case. We know that all of the Bible was pretty much in New Testament, as a fact, was pretty much in the can, we know as a fact, by about 100 AD, 105 or so. And that's the latest. It's already there by then, but we don't know how long it's been there, but we know that it wasn't generations later. That was in the lifetime of the Apostle John. It was all in the can. Done. Kaput. So it's not forgery. It could be forgery, but it's not fable or the product of the long oral tradition. The Bible the New Testament in particular, has to be written by people pretending to be Paul, pretending to be Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and sneaking their text into the church community and having everybody think it's the real thing from the real apostles, pretending to be Paul. All of it has to be fake, made up by people who are trying to deceive the church. This is a completely screwball theory, but that's what they're left with. So the Bible in its essential details, don't necessarily get involved with inerrancy, the Bible in its essential details is accurate concerning the essentials of the faith. The resurrection, the atonement, the virgin birth. It's accurate. The virgin birth is easily demonstrable. It can be easily proven because the story comes straight from Mary. Mary's either lying or telling us the truth. Given the whole situation, she's almost certainly not lying. And we know the story comes straight from Mary, or close friends of Mary. We know that, not even debatable. So this is crazy that what the higher critics are saying, and they are known as liberals. And they decide to throw out historical Christianity as the point of their new Christianity. They call it Christian. It's going to be called Christian liberalism, which throws out historical Christianity as myth and fable and forgery, and they come up with a new Christianity that rejects the fundamentals of the faith. They're apostates, and they say that their new Christianity will be the Christianity that replaces the old Christianity the same way that Christianity replaced Judaism for the believers in Jehovah, except for the Jewish people. Okay, so it's the new era of mankind on earth. And a guy named Harry Emerson Fosdick wrote a sermon called Shall the Fundamentalist Win? Fundamentalist means people who believe in traditional Christianity. And he wants the liberals who don't believe in traditional Christianity and who reject the gospel, the traditional gospel, to prevail in the mainline denominations, which they do for the most part by the 1930s. And that began the war between the quote fundamentalists, who had some problems of their own. As a matter of fact, they have a 4 volumes right there, 4 volumes of the Christian fundamentals came out in the early 20th century. And they were attacking this completely new Christianity, which was actually a form of old Christian Gnosticism. But the new higher critics didn't know that. But it was. It's easy to show. And false Christianity with another Jesus and another gospel. And this creates the great falling away that we saw in both chapter 17 of Revelation and chapter 2 of 2 Thessalonians. Okay, that's the great fall. And all the mainline denominations buy into it, I would say, with just about, except for Roman Catholicism as a holdout on this liberal Christianity until Vatican II. Vatican II tends to embrace the same liberal falling away doctrines that the Protestants have been embracing the previous 50 years. Okay, so what happens is Adrian Rogers gets to be elected head of the Southern Baptist Convention in the 1970s, and he says, hey, let's go back to the fundamentals and throw out all this Christian liberalism and Gnosticism and reassert the traditional faith. Not very complicated. That was Adrian Rogers' claim to fame. the only mainline denomination I'm aware of that was not completely taken over by this liberalism, and No Jesus, Another Gospel, which is a form of Gnosticism, was Assemblies of God. Did not buy into it. But all the Methodists, Baptists, other Baptists, and Presbyterians and so forth did buy into it. Okay, seems kind of straightforward. What's that have to do with the Antichrist? What happens is, this book right here is by Jimmy Carter. It's called Our Endangered Values, America's Moral Crisis. What happens is, Jimmy Carter gets elected president in 1976 because he's talking about Jesus, and evangelicals vote for him like crazy because somebody's finally talking about Jesus and it means a lot to them. What happens, however, is Jimmy Carter, the evangelicals think that Jimmy Carter is one of them. But he's not. He's a Gnostic. He's a liberal Gnostic, which is lawless Christianity. Lawless Christianity. What's the false political leader? He's lawless. Right? Can I make this stuff up? No, I can't. But you can find it in various places if you look around. Okay, so Carter goes to the Southern Baptist Convention in 1978, 2 years into his president, and gives a Gnostic, liberal Christianity, agape love is lawlessness message to the Southern Baptist Convention. And they are floored, but this guy is a heretic. He's a Gnostic. He's an apostate, presenting himself before the church, just like in 2 Thessalonians, with a false Christianity that you shall be as gods. Now, he's not promoting himself as God, but he's promoting a humanistic Christianity. And Adrian Rogers actually rebukes him. But the point is, Jimmy Carter is fulfilling that prophecy of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, overtly, and he was even seen to be by the Southern Baptist Convention, and they deserted him in droves for Reagan in 1980. And Jimmy Carter's bitter because they left him, but he didn't know that they left him because it's not that he thinks they left him. No, they did leave. He thinks that they changed. They didn't change. They were always traditional Christians. They thought he was a traditional Christian until he gave his 1978 speech, and when they found out he wasn't. And Reagan was a shining city on a hill guy, which is liberty and justice for all, which is what you have when you have the reign of Christ. That's God's will for government. So that's a true justice and righteousness as opposed to a lawlessness of social justice, which is what Jimmy Carter is promoting. The reason why he does lawlessness of Christianity, lawless Christianity, and why it's Gnosticism, it's very famous, you can go look this up. A guy named Marcion in the 2nd century held, this is incorrect, but he held, he's very famous for this, that the God of the Old Testament of justice and righteousness and judgment was incompatible with the God of the New Testament, which was a God of love, two different gods, and you had to choose between love and justice. But you couldn't have both. That's a violation of common sense, of course, because if anybody who has a parent knows that you treat your children justly and you discipline, but you love them. You have love and discipline going together, and justice and righteousness. Okay, that's just the way it works. God's our Father, and He loves us, but He also has His justice and His judgment. So, but anyway, Marcion becomes convinced you can either have lawless agape love, because you're going to throw out justice and righteousness, or you can have justice and righteousness with no love. And Marcion said, and there's no judgment, there's no sin, there's no salvation necessary if you throw out righteousness and sin and righteousness. So Marcion creates, he's a Gnostic. He has a higher spiritual consciousness of agape love without any law that's lawless, without any justice and righteousness of the Old Testament, because he sees it to be fundamentally incompatible with love. It's agape love as lawlessness, which is exactly how Jimmy Carter defines his agape love. Love is lawlessness, which is the heresy, and it's actually common throughout all Christian liberals who reject the gospel and the atonement and the resurrection and the virgin birth. So Carter, unlike the early Christian liberals, actually thinks what he's doing is historical Christianity. Whereas the early Christian liberals said, no, the whole point of our liberal Christianity is that we're throwing out the historical faith because of our criticism. Carter thinks that the Christian liberals are historical Christians, and therefore he starts rebuking the traditional Christians as a bunch of narrow-minded fundamentalists, and that they all have to come to this higher spiritual consciousness of agape love as lawlessness for the individual and for the state. He has a theory of the state. He's a politician, not a theologian. And he has a theory of the state that the state does agape love as lawlessness, or wealth redistribution, to take care of. That's the purpose of the state, is to do social justice, wealth redistribution. Social justice, wealth redistribution is the devil's justice. Traditional justice says you deserve the fruits of your own labor. Social justice says you do not deserve the fruits of your own labor. Someone else does, and it's the job of the state to take those fruits and give them out to other people. And when it does, that's social justice. Now, traditionally, justice does redistribute some wealth, but that's not the main function of the state, and that's not the way to stimulate an economy, to make people wealthy. The way to make people wealthy is to grow the economy. But you may have certain programs that exist to help in a safety net under classical concepts of justice. Okay, very simple. Carter gets deserted by the evangelical church. They go to Reagan, and Reagan presents a shining city on a hill vision of government, which is liberty and justice for all, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. He wins in a landslide, and it looks like we're going to see the triumph of God's will for government in America and hopefully the rest of the world, but that doesn't happen. Because Reagan dies, his vision for government in the world and the nations dies with him, and we get George Herbert Walker Bush, fine, decent guy, but he buys into a New World Order agenda, which creates a whole new set of problems for America and the world. So maybe join us again next time. We'll see what the New World Order is and how it's a forerunner to Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 of globalism. They're all globalist theories that are anti-God, humanistic theories. So join us again next time for the New World Order. We'll look at end times actually happening with men of lawlessness going into the church with false Christianity as political leaders selling their agenda to get elected president. See you then.